Okay, so today we are going to be starting with tutorial number 1 for this Midnight Masquerade mini album. So we're going to work on creating the cover and the base pages. So let's get started. Hey and howdy everyone! Welcome back to my channel. It's Jeannie with Paper Pixie Ink, and today we're going to be starting on the tutorial for the recreation of the Midnight Tales mini album, and we're going to be recreating it using the Midnight Masquerade collection from Graphic 45. So I will be using some of the journaling cards from the 4x6 and 3x4 journaling card pack, as well as some chipboard pieces and an 8x8 paper pad. And then I'm also going to use this Midnight Navy cardstock from Recollections, along with some champagne colored glitter cardstock. So in order to get started, we are going to need 3 pieces of chipboard. We need 2 pieces cut to 8.5 by 8.5, and then we need 1 piece of chipboard cut to 8.5 by 2.5. And then once you have those cut, you can go ahead and glue 3 pieces of the Midnight Navy cardstock together along the long side, and this is going to be what we're going to use to wrap our chipboard to make our cover. So let's go ahead and get that done. Alright, so now that we have those glued together, let's go ahead and attach our chipboard that we cut previously. So I'm going to glue my chipboard down using liquid adhesive, and I'm going to leave about 1/8 of an inch between the spine on either side. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the spine so that I can make sure it's centered so that my folds aren't on either one of the seams. So let's go ahead and get that done. Alright, so now it's time to get our corners cut off so that we can miter them properly. Before I can do that, I'm going to go ahead and cut off a little bit of the excess on either side of my covers, so on the left of the front cover and to the right of the back cover. And then I'm going to go ahead and use this tool that I've picked up from Amazon and cut off the excess in the corners so that I can miter them. So let's go ahead and get that done. Okay, so now it is time to finish wrapping our cover. So to do this, I'm going to take some 1/4 inch double-sided adhesive. This is from scrapbook.com, but there's scrappy tape and score tape and lots of different brands have this double-sided adhesive. Now I really like the scrapbook.com version. It's relatively inexpensive in comparison to some of the others. It tears very, very easily, and I find that it holds very, very well. So I'm going to go ahead and put this double-sided adhesive on the chipboard all around the outside of it, and then I will use liquid adhesive in the corner along the edge of the chipboard on the cardstock and on the cardstock itself. And I'm going to go ahead and do the 2 long sides first. And then when I go to do the 2 short edges, I will use a bone folder to kind of fold in the edges of the corners so that I get a nice crisp fold for my cover. So we're gonna go ahead and get all that done, and then we'll be back. Alright, so now that we have the cover wrapped, let's go ahead and make the binding. So we're going to take a piece of cardstock and we're going to cut it to 8 1/4 by 11, and then we are going to score that along the short edge, so you'll have it to the 11-inch mark on your scoreboard. You're going to score it at 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, etc. And you're going to do this 12 times because this mini album has 4 pages in it. So let's go ahead and get that done. Okay, so now that we have all of our scores done, we're going to take some 1/4-inch double-sided adhesive and we're going to start with putting it on where our tabbed bindings are going to be. So I'm going to put it between my first 2 score lines, and then I'm going to skip a section, and then I'm going to go the next 2 sets of score lines, skip a section, next 2, so on and so forth. And then I'm going to go ahead and take double-sided adhesive and put it on the flap on both sides, so that when I go to put my binding down, I have double-sided adhesive on either side. So let's get that done. I'm just going to take my bone folder and I'm going to burnish down all of my double-sided adhesive. I just want to make sure that it is very, very well stuck. When I go to make the flaps to attach my pages to, I will use liquid adhesive as well on top of the double-sided adhesive, but I really want to make sure that this sticks really well. So let's go ahead, and in that first section that you put the double-sided adhesive in between your 2 score lines, let's go ahead and remove the backing for the double-sided adhesive and add some liquid adhesive along the other side of that flap area, and then we're going to stick that down. And we're going to repeat this for each one of the sections that don't have the double-sided adhesive, so that we can make our page flaps, and you should end up with 4 of them when you're done. And then I'm going to burnish those down just to make sure that I have a really, really good bond on that. So let's finish that off and we'll move on. I'm gonna go ahead and take some paper snips, and I'm just gonna cut off a little bit of the edges on each one of my flaps to attach my pages to. I just find that it's easier for me to put my pages on when they are angled like this. It's entirely up to you. I know a lot of people who don't do it, so whatever works best for you. This is what I like, though. All right, so let's go ahead and just attach our binding to the spine and covers, and then we will cut a couple of pieces of cardstock to 8 1/4 by 8 1/4 to go on the inside front and back covers. So to attach our binding, I'm just going to peel off all of the backing for my double-sided adhesive, and then I'm going to apply liquid adhesive over top of that, making sure to get along all of the edges and in the kind of like seam area for each of the page flaps. So we'll do that and come back in a minute. And I will be eyeballing the placement of this. You can measure it out. I don't typically have the patience for it, but you can measure it so that your binding is lined up properly. Okay, so now we're going to move on to making the pages. So we're going to use 8 pieces of cardstock for this, and we're going to cut 4 of those to 9 1/4 by 8 1/2, and the other 4 are going to be cut to 8 1/4 by 8 1/4. And now on our cardstock that we cut to 9 1/4 by 8 1/2, we are going to score along the shorter edge at 8 3/4 and 1/2, or you can flip it all the way around and do 8 3/4 and 8 3/4. And then on the long edge, we are going to score at 1/4 inch or 8 1/4 inch, depending on which side you want to do it on. So we're going to do that for all 4 of those ones, and then we will put them together. Okay, so on the corners where there are the 2 score lines, I'm just going to snip those off so that I can get nice flat pages. And then we are going to go ahead and score them and glue the sides to the other pieces of cardstock that we cut to 8 1/4 by 8 1/4. And to do this, we are going to only glue one of the 1/2 inch flaps and the 1/4 inch flap, so that will essentially be the right side of the page and the bottom of the page, because the left side of the page, that flap, is what we're going to attach to our flaps on our that we've attached to our spine for our binding. So let's go ahead and get that done. Okay, so now that we have all 4 of our base pages done, we're going to go ahead and just attach them directly to the binding that we added to our spine. To do this, I'm just going to take some liquid adhesive. I'm going to put some on either side of the tabs on the spine and glue the pages down. And I will use my bone folder to make sure that they sit nice and flat and that they have a nice good seal on them, because I want to make sure that these stick well. So we'll get that done, and then we're going to start on the inside front cover. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started on our pages. So in my original album, I had used pieces from the 12x12 Patterns and Solids collection on my inside, front, and back covers. Because I don't have that, I'm just going to cut down some of this glitter cardstock and add a little bit of extra bling to this. So I'm going to actually cut 4 pieces of this glitter cardstock to 8 1/4 by 8 1/4 so that I have one for my front cover, my back cover, and my inside front and back covers. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a piece of my pattern paper from the collection to go on the inside front cover, and then I'm going to take a piece of cardstock and I'm going to cut it to 6 inches by 6 inches, and then I'm going to cut that in half diagonally, and I'm going to use that to create my little diagonal pocket on both my inside front cover and the inside back cover, which we'll do in a different video. So let's get that done. Okay, so now that I have my diagonal cut pieces for my corner pockets, I'm going to go ahead and score at the 1/2 inch mark on both of the shorter sides. Technically, you could have done this before you cut it diagonally. It probably is easier. I never really think about it until after the fact, but you can do it before and then cut diagonally, and then you would just already have them cut. So I'm going to use my snips to just cut off the corner there, and then I'm going to use my envelope punch to cut the corners of the pocket off. So I'm just going to line up the edges with the score line. So on the envelope punch, you have that little tick spot that comes out from the punch. I'm just going to line that up with my score line and punch, and I'm just going to flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. And then I'm going to use my snips to cut diagonally to trim those pieces off. Alright, so now I'm just going to choose some paper and a journaling card to go on my corner pocket, and I'm just going to use a pencil to mark my spots, leaving a little bit of an edge on either side. After you've cut a little piece off on both ends of your pattern paper, just so that it kind of lines up with what we punched on our cardstock, let's go ahead and glue that all down. And one thing that I didn't mention before is that I am going to edge all of my pattern paper with some chipped sapphire distress ink, and that's just, you don't have to do it. It's entirely optional. I just like how it can help finish the edges, because the edges are always white. So especially if I'm using a darker base cardstock, I don't always, but sometimes I do. I like how it looks finished. Alright, and now that we have this base piece put together, we are going to attach a 3x4 journaling card. So this is the one that I chose, but you can choose whichever one you want, or just another piece of pattern paper, or it's entirely up to you. But I am going to back that journaling card with some of my colored cardstock. So I'm going to cut that to 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. And then I'll round the edges using my Crop-A-Dile on the 1/4 inch setting. Alright, so now that we're done the inside front cover, we're going to move on to the front of the first page. To make the little flap, we're going to need a piece of cardstock that is cut to 8 1/4 by 6 1/2, and then we're going to score at the 1/2 inch mark or the 6 inch mark, whichever you prefer, along the long edge, so that our flap on our page will be 6 inches wide. And then we're going to trim the corners using a Crop-A-Dile punch. Okay, so let's go ahead and pick out some pattern paper to go on the base page, and you won't need to cut this. That will stay at 8 inches by 8 inches, and then we'll need 2 pieces for our flap, and we're going to cut those to 8 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and then we will punch the corners using the same Crop-A-Dile punch that we used on the cardstock. And then we're going to go ahead and glue all of that down. so now that we have all of our pieces glued down for the main piece, we are going to cut a piece of cardstock to 8 inches by 5 inches, and then we're going to score on the short edge at 4 inches. And this will create the little piece that we will put on the front cover that will flip up. So the reason that we cut the cardstock to 8 by 5 and then scored it 4 inches is so that we can take one of our 3 by 4 journaling cards to put on the back on the other side of it. So I'm just going to cut one of my 3 by 4 journaling cards down a little bit. I'm just going to trim off the excess on the edges, and we'll use this on the back. And then on the front of it, we will use a piece of pattern paper to cover it, and we will cut that to 4 3/4 inches by 3 3/4 inches. Alright, so let's go ahead and get our pattern paper glued onto our front piece. And then we are going to go ahead and add a couple of magnets to the inside of this so that this will stay closed when the pages are open, because we're going to cover this with some photo mats in a little bit. And now we're going to cut a piece of cardstock to back our 3 by 4 journaling card that we trimmed down a little bit for our back piece here. So I'm just going to cut this to 3 inches by 4 inches so that it will match up with the front piece that will hang over a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to line up my front piece on top of what I've already glued down, and then mark the back of that cardstock to indicate where I want to put my glue. Because obviously I don't want to put glue on the whole thing, I just need the glue to go on the piece that's going to go on the flap. And I am going to go one step deeper, and I am only going to put glue along the edges, so along the edge of the place that I've marked, so that's why I'm using a ruler, and then along the bottom and then the other edge. And the reason that I'm doing this is because I want to leave that open as a small little tuck spot to put another piece of my cut aparts or a piece of the 3 by 4 journaling cards in. Alright, so now I'm going to take the 3 by 4 piece of cardstock that we cut earlier, and I am going to put glue along the top and bottom edges, and then what will be the right edge. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to create another tuck spot for another journaling card or cut apart from the collection. So let's go ahead and get that done, and then we're going to attach the journaling card on top of that. That's the end of our tutorial for today. The next tutorial will be the back of the first page, the front and back of the second page, and probably the front at least of the third page, maybe the back of it as well. So I hope to have those posted within the next few days. As always, if you're interested in seeing more, don't forget to click on that subscribe button. Thanks, everyone.